Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is Monday, which remains Monday review. I shall be looking back at Saturday's very comfortable 1-0 win over Michael Appleton's Lincoln City. But we do also have a midweek game this week. Tuesday, tomorrow night, we host Sunderland in the FA Cup first round replay. The winner of that tie will go on to face either Wimbledon or Doncaster at home weekend of the 29th, 30th and 1st of November/December, But yeah, first things first, Saturday's performance, very, very accomplished from the boys. Thought it was probably, aside from maybe Wickham at home, the best team performance that we've put in this season. And it made it back-to-back home wins, which I think is the first time we've achieved that under Steve Lovell. After last Tuesday's very decent 2-0 win in our final leasings.com trophy game against a young Tottenham side. But yeah, back to Saturday, thought from front to back we were absolutely superb. I think our match ratings reflected that, and we'll get onto them a little bit later and compare ours to that of Luke Cordell, who writes for the Medway Messenger. But yeah, I think there was only one or two that dropped below 7 for varying reasons, and we'll get onto that in a little while. Yeah, should have been more than just the one. I think for anyone that was at the game, we created plenty. I think first half we had Ollie Lee drilled one just over the bar. Stuart O'Keefe had one straight at the keeper from about 20 yards. I think either side of him, and it would have caused the keeper a massive problem. We scored a good goal, really good finish from Mika Mandron, and we'll get onto him in a minute and his performance in more detail. Second half, I think Brandon Hanlon twice got into really good positions, particularly one where he spun his centre half and got his shot away, and in fairness to the centre-back, I think it might have been Kian Bolger, managed to recover and make a really good block for a shot that looked like it was goal-bound. Mika Mandron should have done better with a header that he put over the top. He had another one that clipped the bar with the keeper beaten. And I think Stuart O'Keefe drilled one over as well, second period, after a drop of the shoulder that ended up in the Rainham end. So all in all, a really good performance. But it wasn't just about the attacking players creating openings and creating goal-scoring chances. As a back four, I thought. And yeah, at the beginning, obviously we saw that Conor Ogleby come out and lined up at left back. Barry Fuller retained his place at right back. And Jack Tucker moved into the middle. We thought, oh, that's a couple of changes there. How are we gonna deal with that? But in fairness to both Jack Tucker next to Max Amar, and especially Conor Ogleby, who was never going to play left back according to Steve Evans back in the summer, both were absolutely superb. And yeah, really good to see Jack Tucker have another good game, back-to-back clean sheets for the 20-year-old. And yeah, Steve Evans can't talk highly enough of him, and I don't think he's far wrong when he says he'll play at a higher level than Gills, and that's no disrespect to us as a club, but he seems to have all the tools to go very far, and let's just hope that it's not just yet. But yeah, I think 99.9% of Gills fans all agreed that man of the match at the weekend was Michael Mandron, the big number 9. Obviously came in to replace Tom Eaves in the summer per se, because he's of a similar size and a similar build and probably plays the game a similar way. He's not a Brandon Hanlon type or a Michael Njoli or an Alex Jakubiak, who are, you know, full of more pace, going to run in behind, work the fullbacks, drift out wide. He's more of a battering ram type, target man type. If you don't want to stereotype him too much, he can play with his back to goal. And I think as far as a centre forward's performance at this level goes, that was as close to perfect at the weekend as can be. I think the only way would have been better if he'd scored a hat-trick, and he could well have done. Like we've said, he hit the bar with a tough chance and an easier one than his goal. He should have scored, and he headed it over into the Rainham end. But small gripes in what was a superb display from the big front man. Steve Evans talks and says that he had a summer that he probably enjoyed a little too much because he was without a club, so he was a bit behind in terms of fitness when he come in on trial, and that's why he wasn't getting as many minutes at the beginning of the season. And we said a few times, particularly Stocky was banging the drum for him to start games earlier in the campaign, and perhaps that's the reason he wasn't. But Steve said that Big Meek has worked really hard in training. He's got himself up to speed in terms of his fitness levels, and we're now getting the performances that we want to see out of him. And that's 3 goals for the season now, so he's joint second highest scorer for us. I think with a handful of other players, the likes of Stuart O'Keefe and Brandon Hanlon and Ollie Lee, they're all on the same number, chasing down Alex Jakubiak, who's on 5. So can only fill in with confidence, Mika Mandron. And in terms of a partnership, I think that might be what we see going forward for the majority of games, because his and Brandon Hanlon's link-up play was absolutely superb. We played some really good stuff as a side. This wasn't no lucky long ball performance, and it wasn't a case of us just hitting Mika early. We played some really good stuff on the deck, some really good interplay, 1-2s, fast passing, incisive stuff that got in behind them plenty of times. And I think if we'd won 3-0, it wouldn't have flattered Lincoln at all, because they were really poor, but that was to do with us more than them. I think it said a lot about the game, and we mentioned this on the Match Day Live, that Jack Payne started the game, had to be taken off. Tyler Walker didn't get a kick in our penalty area for 90 minutes until right at the end, when he had one header straight at Jack Bonham, and they had to get John Akindi on at half time. And we thought, well, this is going to be a test for Jack Tucker. We said in the ground at half time we thought it was going to be tricky for him, because he is still small in terms of size and stature of a League One centre half, and obviously he's only going to grow and beef up more with age. But I thought he handled Akindi really well, and I thought his performance got better and better as the game went on. It was almost as if he said to himself, right, John Akindi's a big bloke, I'm going to have to be really switched on here. Didn't give him a sniff, competed in the air, competed on the deck, and was really good. And alongside Max Amar, who cajoled him and encouraged him through that 45 minutes against the big front man, I thought between them they were absolutely spot on, as were both fullbacks. Yeah, so anyway, that's probably enough about Saturday's game, sorry. Just the final thing is what we do with Luke, who writes the Medway Messenger. His final paragraph for his match report was, the Gills have quality too and still have things to work on to ensure they aren't left sweating on a result in a game in which they had dominated. That was probably the only small disappointment, was that we didn't score more goals, because all I can remember is half chances for Lincoln. Like I say, the Tyler Walker header right at the end that was straight at Jack Bonham, and he flicked it over for a corner. I think a minute or so before that, last minute of 90 minutes, John Akindi's header drifted wide of the far post. But apart from that, there was a couple of snapshots from Bruno Andrade in the first half, but they didn't really trouble us at all. And he was probably the bright spark, if you can call it that, for the away side. But he didn't have much effect on the game as well. So kudos to everyone. It was a really good performance. In terms of match ratings, we'll do Luke's first and then ours. Jack Bonham 6. Luke, we said 6.5. Barry Fuller, we both said 7. Max Amar, Luke said 7. We said 7.5. Jack Tucker, we matched up with a 7. Connor Ogilvie, Luke gave a 7. We said 7.5. Stuart O'Keefe, again, Luke said 7. We said 7.5. Alfie Jones, 7 for Luke. We said 6.5. I thought he was one of the two that was just off it. Like him and Jack Bonham and Ollie Lee, who we gave 6.5, and Luke gave us 6.2, were the only ones that come out under 7. Mark Byrne, we both gave a 7, and the only reason that Jack Bonham for us got under 7 was because he was a spectator for most of the game. Everything that he did correctly, but we just thought it would have been a bit unfair on those that had more of a pressing contribution to the game if he'd got the same rating as them. And in terms of the front two, Brandon Hanlon, Luke gave a 6, we gave a 7. And Mika Mandron got an 8 from Luke, and we said 9. Like, for us, it was as good a centre-forward performance. If that had been Tom Eaves last season, we'd have been raving about it and saying how good he was and he's going to score this and that. And let's hope that we can get that sort of performance out of Mika 9 times out of 10. We know he's a League One player for a reason, so he will be inconsistent. But if we can get him near them levels on a consistent basis, then we're going to have a decent target man type to play alongside Brandon or Alex or Mikael and Jolly. So all in all, a really good performance. Really well earned 3 points, and it takes us within, a point or two of the top half now. So we're doing all right still. Right, we do have a game tomorrow. It is the small matter of an FA Cup replay. So I'm going to talk about that briefly, but then I'm going to leave you in the hands of Graham from the Roker Report. If you've not followed them on Twitter, it's a really good page for everything Sunderland. They've got the podcast, they do written articles, loads of good content on their Twitter page as well. Yeah, he's got involved and he's going to give you some team news from their perspective and what he thinks in terms of their lineup and a potential score prediction. I will go through ours briefly. But yeah, so yeah, Sunderland tomorrow in the FA Cup. Just looking briefly in terms of form, I'm not doing just league and home and away. I'm just looking at briefly at the last 6. We've only lost once in the last 6 games in all competitions. We've won our last 2 games at home, back-to-back clean sheets as well, which can only serve as a good thing. And on the flip side, Sunderland's form in the last 6 is the opposite. They've only won once out of that half a dozen games, and that was against a really poor Southend side. and no winning 5 on the road, which is unbelievable for a side that's got that amount of quality in it, that amount of depth. When you look at us and keep saying we need a clinical centre forward, and they've got people like Will Grigg that can't get in the team. They've got Mark McNulty, they've got Chris Maguire who plays off of them, they've got Charlie Wyke, who I don't think's fit, but we'll let Graham talk to you in more detail about that. In terms of our team, I think there will be changes. I'm not going to try and predict an 11 because obviously it is a quick turnaround between the league games. I know there will be changes for us because we need to freshen it up. Sunderland didn't have a game at the weekend due to international call-up, so they've had the benefit of 7 days off since their 3-0 defeat to Scunthorpe last week in the EFL Trophy. It'll be a tough game, we know that. In terms of a score prediction, I will do that after you've listened to Graham. So here he comes now. This is Graham from the Roker Report with his Sunderland perspective.
Hi there, Jills in the Blood. Just Graham here from Roker Report. Going to give you a little bit of a preview from a red and white perspective. You can probably see the wonderful stadium light in the background there, which probably indicates who I support. But previewing the game tomorrow, there's not much to say about it. It's the game that no one really wanted. And do any of us really want to win? I suppose yes, but what does it mean for league form? For us, massively important game on Saturday at home to Coventry. We've been completely off form. The FA Cup would normally take a bit of a back seat, but since we last faced you, we lost 3-0 away at Scunthorpe in the checker trade, or the leasing.com, or whatever it's called these days, which is a horrific result, to be totally honest with you, and we did have more or less a full side out. So we're looking for a positive result, but then no one really wants progression in the FA Cup. To be honest, based on the team news, we may not have too much of a choice about whether we'll stay in this cup or go out, because our entire defence is injured. Jordan Willis, who's been probably our most consistent defender, is out. Joel Lynch, who's been relatively impressive since he came in on a free transfer from QPR, sort of just after pre-season, has been really impressive. Tom Flanagan doesn't look like he's available. Conor McLaughlin is suspended, so our defence is looking really threadbare, and there's a possibility we may have our left back, which is Lawrence de Bock, our second choice left back, playing at centre half as he did against Scunthorpe, and possibly a young boy as well. Looking back to the game at the Stadium Light here, the first round, it wasn't the most entertaining of games. It was a really poor performance from ourselves. You look to have something about yourself as well. So it wasn't the greatest of game, but you know, you never know. Both sides will probably want to show, if they're playing French players, the players will want to show that essentially they've got what it takes to be in the side on Saturday. So we may see an unexpected cracker, but I wouldn't bet my house on it, to be honest. However, prediction-wise, towards our first 11, first and foremost, I think we'll start with Lee Burge in goal, who has returned from injury, and John McLaughlin unlikely to play after his howler against yourselves, I think. At right back, we're probably likely to have Lugo Nyan. At left back, Denver Hume. Then we'll have someone young at centre back, I would imagine, alongside Lawrence de Bock, unless Alan Ozturk can regain fitness. So I'm not too sure who played centre back, to be completely honest. It is a bit of a crisis. In midfield, George Dobson is injured, so we're likely to see Max Power alongside Grant Ledbetter. The front three, Lyndon Gooch is still injured, so most likely to see Duncan Watmore on the right, Aidan McGeady on the left, and Chris Maguire just behind either Will Grigg or potentially Mark McNulty. I suppose he'll be wanting my second prediction, which is for a score. I said 1-1 in the first game because I just knew it would come to the game where we go to a replay and no one really wanted it. But I think Sunderland, unfortunately, will probably likely lose. I'm going to say 2-0 to Gillingham.
Cheers for that, pal. Much appreciated. Really enjoy you getting involved. Like I say, I made an appearance on the Roker Report prior to the first game, and it was a really good chat, and it is a really good podcast and a really good Twitter page, and some of the articles they get out are really good as well. And I know they do well to get loads of ex-players on, even the current chairman, which is great for channels like this and podcasts like that want to have fan interaction with the club and sort of bring them closer together. It's not something we can do, unfortunately, but that chat's for another day. So yeah, that was Graham's thoughts in terms of their team news. Seems they've got a few injury problems. Looks like they're going to be pretty much patching a team up due to injuries and suspensions and call-ups for international sides. And interesting that Graham says we're going to win. So I guess I better do my score prediction now. Looking at the comparative form over the last half a dozen games in all competitions, coupled with the fact that it's a Tuesday night, it's a long trip for them. How up for it are they going to be? Is this a priority for Phil Parkinson and his players? I think for us it's a big game, regardless of the fact that Sunderland are in the same division as us at the moment. Despite being a Premier League team as recently as 2 years ago, I think it would still be a massive scalp for us. It would be a massive feather in the cap if we could pull off a win. Buoyed by 2 really good home performances, buoyed by 2 really good home results, and buoyed by back-to-back home clean sheets. I am going to go for a final score, whether this is in 90 minutes or after extra time. Gillingham 2, Sunderland 1. Right. Loving to be positive, it is good. Like I say, after the Rotherham defeat where we was all doom and gloom and we lost 3-0, it's been a really good response by the players since then. 1-1 draw at the Stadium of Light, a 2-0 win in the Leasings.com trophy over a technically very good but very young Tottenham side, and then a very solid 1-0 win at the weekend to claim 3 points in the league. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Cheers again to Graham from the Roker Report. Go and give them a follow on Twitter if you're not doing so already. You know where we are: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. Myself and Stocky will be at the ground tomorrow for the match day live, so if you want to pop over and say hello before the game, we can try and get you on, score predictions, that type of thing, if you're interested in having a chat. But until next time, up the Gills.